Welcome to the Resilience Training Program, a project created by Seniors Action Quebec, sponsored by Canadian Heritage. My name is Mirella Castricchini and would like to share this program with you, and I hope that what you learn through this training will help you grow and develop your resilience skills. Each of the modules contain a general theoretical review on the topic, exercises, and a few scenarios to explore issues that are frequently encountered by seniors. We also include a list of resources that are available in your community to address these issues. Finally, all references are listed at the end of this module, and we encourage you to explore those that interest you most. Who is Seniors Action Quebec? Seniors Action Quebec is a nonprofit organization that works to maintain and enhance the vitality of English speaking Quebec seniors. Its mission is to identify and address challenges and issues in order to promote a healthy and active lifestyle for English speaking seniors. The goal of this program is to build a stronger, more vibrant English speaking seniors network who will be better equipped to engage with the wider community. Its objectives is to provide a series of resilience skills trainings to English speaking seniors that will build confidence, nurture self advocacy, and promote community engagement. This training program uses Dr. Kenneth Ginsberg's model of building resilience skills as a framework for our 6 modules. Dr. Ginsberg, child pediatrician and human development expert, proposes that there are 7 integral and interrelated components that make up being a resilient individual. The 7 C's are actually an adaptation of the 5 C's model of the positive youth development movement. The skills include competence, connection, character, confidence, contribution, coping, and control. What is resilience? Resilience is the quality of recovering quickly from failure and adversity, and not only returning to what was, but using the opportunity to grow and further your personal growth. Module 4 is the second part of our discussion on control and coping. As we've read in the previous module, these competencies are closely related in their role in enhancing resilience. The objective of this module is to identify various effective coping strategies that enhance resilience. Take a moment to reflect on how do you cope with a stressful situation. What is coping? As defined by psychologists Lazarus and Foldman, coping is the constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to manage specific external and internal demands that are appraised as taxing or exceeding the resources of the person. In other words, continuously seeking different ways to manage specific situations that are interpreted as being overwhelming or as being beyond the person's capacities or the person's resources. The theory of coping suggests that, whether conscious or subconscious, the goal of all coping mechanisms is to solve a problem and return to normalcy or stability. Coping strategies can be positive or negative, depending on whether they increase or reduce mental being, and coping is dependent on personality patterns and your perception of the experience. Finally, the strategies one uses for adapting to a situation is highly individualized. Just as we all react to stressors differently, how we cope with them is also very personal. What are the factors that influence a person's choice of coping behaviors? Here are a few to consider, such as where you are in your life cycle. Are you a young adult or a young senior? The intensity of the stress. Is it a matter of losing your car keys or losing a pet? And how important or significant is the stressor? What is your perceived control regarding the situation? And what do you perceive as it within your control or out of your control in this situation? And what is the outcome you're expecting or hoping for? The internal resources, that is, the skills and abilities you have developed over the years, such as the emotional regulation, self efficacy, confidence, your belief and value system, and your motivation. The external resources that are available to you, your social network, your community resources, as well as where you reside, all influence your choice of coping behavior. And finally, your personality trait, who you are your character, your attitude, and your natural disposition. Researchers Lazarus and Folkman, in their work of coping, identified 5 types of coping styles. The coping styles are the usual approaches that the individual will take in response to stress. These approaches are consistent over time and across situations. There are adaptive coping styles and maladaptive coping styles. Here are the 5 that Lazarus and Folkman identified: problem focused, emotion focused, seeking understanding or meaning, help seeking, and problem avoidance. So, the coping style is the individual's approach to dealing with the stressor, and the coping strategies are the choices or specific actions the individual takes in order to respond to a stressor. For example, in order to cope with stress of work or loss of a friend, your coping style may be emotion focused, and your strategy may be to join a support group or practice meditation. Let's review all the coping styles in more detail. The problem solving coping style is characterized by the individual seeking ways to solve the problem by taking direct action, researching, or implementing an action plan. The emotional focused coping style is that of coping with issues that elicit a lot of emotional responses. For example, the loss of a relationship or the loss of a pet. The strategies include getting in touch with the emotions and letting them out, letting someone know about your feelings, manage hostile feelings, keeping emotions under control by doing activities that distract you or calm you down. For example, meditation, mindfulness practices, relaxation techniques. The third coping style is that of seeking understanding. The tendency for the individual is to approach the stressful situation by looking for meaning in what is occurring. The coping strategy is to engage in reflective exercises such as journaling or meditation, or by considering a different perspective on the situation by reframing the stressor and giving it a less threatening meaning. Before we discuss the last coping style, we should review what is understood as an adaptive coping style and a maladaptive coping style. The coping styles mentioned to this point are considered adaptive, as their application allows for the individual to move forward or reduce the stressor without negative results to the self or others. On the other hand, maladaptive coping style and strategies are characterized by actions that may result in long term negative outcomes. Problem avoidance and distraction is considered a maladaptive coping style. The individual may respond to a stressor as acting like nothing happened, avoid thinking or doing anything about the problem, or leaving the scenario and staying away from the stressful situation, using distractions to avoid thinking about the problem, for example, entertainment, substance abuse. It is important to note that stressors are subject to the individual's interpretation, and the choices made to cope with the stressor are equally individual. To distinguish how maladaptive strategies can prove to be adaptive is the example of a person walking away from a bully. This avoidance can serve to keep the individual safe. However, it may be that the strategy would require some reconsideration if the source of the stressor remains present and the individual will need to use another coping strategy to alleviate the problem. Again, strategies become maladaptive when the outcomes do not contribute to the person's ability to deal with the situation toward a favorable outcome. The coping strategy wheel is the result of the work done by researchers Skinner and Zimmer-Gembeck. In reviewing 44 studies on coping and coping strategies that individuals develop from infancy through adolescence, the researchers felt that the previous categories of the 5 coping styles were too general and failed to cover the multiple purposes served by each way of coping. Skinner structured the wide range of coping strategies and identified 12 general, most frequently used categories of coping. They refer to these categories as coping families. The wheel is divided in 4 quadrants with 3 rims within each quadrant. The outer rim lists a total of 41 common ways of coping. The second RIN is the coping families, defined as the general tendency that each of the specific ways of coping which belong to this family share. For example, reading, observations, and asking others all share the same action tendency, information seeking, and so belong to the coping family of information seeking. And in the inner rim of the wheel is the focus or lack of focus of the category. The green wheel, as seen here, is known as the adaptive coping wheel, with the 41 adapted or positive coping strategies, while the red wheel, or the maladaptive wheel, as seen in the following slides, lists the maladaptive or negative coping strategies. Although there is not a complete consensus that these are the core categories of coping, they do allow for easy categorization of the most commonly used coping strategies. This tool offers a graphical representation of Skinner's coping families. The maladaptive coping strategy wheel identifies the 12 maladaptive or negative coping families, as seen here. Here is a split image of the coping strategy wheels, zeroing in on the focus quadrant of actions and available options. Note in the actions quadrant in the adaptive coping wheel, or the green wheel, we find the coping family of problem solving, and the ways of coping include strategizing, instrumental action, planning, and so on. Whereas in the negative or maladaptive coping wheel, or the red wheel, found in the quadrant of actions, is the coping family of escape and helplessness. The ways of coping include behavioral avoidance, denial, cognitive exhaustion, confusion, and so on. How can this tool be useful? When an individual is using a coping strategy that is not helpful, as is listed under one of the 4 quadrants of the red wheel, one may consider the same quadrant of the green wheel to see which of the strategies listed under this quadrant may be considered a healthy alternative. For instance, a person is using rigid perseveration or continuing to exert control despite a lack of a result as a coping strategy. This maladaptive coping strategy falls under the focus of available options, belonging to the coping family of submission. By looking up the adaptive coping family that is shown at the same location in the green wheel, in this case, accommodation, the person may consider the coping strategies listed under this family. For instance, for this person, it may be more adaptive to surrender to uncontrollable circumstances rather than to persist. This should give you a clear idea of how Skinner grouped some of the 41 coping strategies used by individuals when coping with stressful situations. It is important to note, however, that the coping strategies used is strongly dependent on the problem and the situation at hand. Even the strategies that are listed here as non-adaptive can be adaptive in some situations. For example, if an argument between two people is escalating and becoming aggressive, it may be best to walk away or submitting in order to prevent possible injury. In other words, given the circumstances, every possible way of coping can be appropriate, adaptive, or right. In the same way, strategies that are listed here as adaptive can be highly non-adaptive. The most effective coping style is the one which reduces stress and resolves a problem without enduring negative consequences. Our first exercise is the Brief Cope Scale Questionnaire by C.S. Carver. This is a 28-item self-report questionnaire designed to measure effective and ineffective ways to cope with a stressful event. You may want to use a past difficult situation or a current one to help you answer the questionnaire. Move to the next slides to begin. And once you have finished, follow the instructions on how to tabulate your scores. Then to reflect on your results, proceed to exercise 2. Now that you've completed the questionnaire, use the table to the left to score your responses. For each question, give yourself 1 point for I haven't been doing this at all, 2 points for I've been doing this a little bit, 3 points for I've been doing this a medium amount, and 4 points for I've been doing this a lot. Then add the scores that you've assigned to each question to each individual set. Example, add the result of question 1 or COPE 1 to the result of question 19. Then add the two to get your final score on that set. So as highlighted in yellow in the slide, the total score to the coping strategy self-distraction is 6, 2 points from COPE 1 and 4 points from COPE 19. Complete the scoring and then move to exercise 2 to reflect on your answers. Exercise 2. Use the results of the questionnaire to answer the following. List 3 of your highest scores and match them with the coping style. List 3 of your lower scores and match them with the coping style. What do these scores reveal to you, and what was your coping style during the situation? Does it reflect your usual coping mechanisms in similar situations? Use the strategy coping wheel to look at where your coping style is situated. But before locating your coping strategies on the wheel, you will note that the terminologies used in the questionnaire are not the same as the terms used in the coping wheel. However, you can refer to the next slide to match the terminologies. For example, self-distraction belongs to the submission family on the maladaptive coping strategy wheel. Locate where your coping strategy is situated and look at its counterpart. For example, if one of the strategies is denial, found in the maladaptive coping wheel, the opposing coping style on the adapting wheel is problem solving and information seeking in the adaptive wheel. How can you use this information to serve your resilience? What is the learning in this exercise? The following slides feature a description of some of the coping strategies found on both adaptive and maladaptive coping wheel. Take a few moments to observe where the coping strategies are situated on the wheel and the description of each of the specific coping strategies. The first of these is accommodation, found on the focus quadrant of available options, and in the coping family of accommodation, or the ways of coping, is expressed as distraction, cognitive restructuring, acceptance, and/or surrender. Accommodation involves flexibility, adjusting preference to the options available in stressful conditions. This allows the individual to maintain their flexibility and autonomy even under coercive circumstances. One can say things such as, I accept that this has happened and that it can't be changed, or I realistically consider the available options and base my choices on this. Note that additional coping strategies are included at the end of this module. Self-comforting as a strategy, for instance, defined as active attempts at self-care and regulation of distress. For example, I take responsibility for my actions, or I allow my emotions to be present and prevent them from guiding my action. Located on the maladaptive coping strategy wheel, we find ways of coping such as escape, characterized by feeling of fear and the desire to distance oneself from stress. Although escape can be maladaptive, it can also serve the adaptive function of removing oneself from dangerous environments. Statements such as, after the painful encounter with my manager, I have done everything to avoid any form of contact with him, or because the thought of that miserable experience may turn up again, I try to distract myself as much as possible by watching television. Another maladaptive coping strategy is delegation, and that is defined as the over-reliance on other people when dealing with a stressful situation. It has the disadvantage of using others' resources, as well as preventing the individual from developing their full capacities. There's a desire to be carried by the support of other and accompanied by overwhelmed self-absorption. Focus on the distressing aspects of the situation and surrender to self pity. For example, I feel that I can't handle stressful situations on my own, or I feel that my problems are worse than what most people need to deal with. For more coping strategies, consult the annex at the end of this presentation. Social seeking, understood to be one of the more effective strategies, as it combines our need for contact and desire to connect with others when facing difficult moments. The description given here is turning to other people in the face of stressful events, using available resources to deal with the problem. For example, I talked to someone who could do something concrete about the problem, or I discussed my feelings with someone. Exercise 3. This exercise introduces some common coping mechanisms. Use it to help you understand how you have successfully overcome adversity in the past and identify skills that you might wish to develop with practice. How is personal control and coping related? This assessment tool shows how the accurate and inaccurate assessment of the individual's sense of control influences the coping strategies adopted. Let's take a closer look. On the first row of the table, we have accurate assessment of personal control. This implies that you have a clear understanding of the situation and know the limits of your control. With that understanding, you engage in doing or by taking action. And in the coping strategy you adopt reflects that understanding. For example, you've been asked to leave your apartment due to renovations. You understand the renovations are necessary, but this will leave you having to look for a new place to stay, as well as having the added burden of dealing with the limited budget. In your assessment, you may decide in doing something by taking action. You may want to fight the landlord or seek ways to fight off the temporary eviction, or you may understand that the conditions are out of your control. And not doing in this situation is to surrender or letting go. Your coping strategy then may be one that enables you to manage the emotions that this situation has elicited. So the coping strategies you may adopt is the emotion focus or self-comforting, which involves getting in touch with your emotions and letting them go, or by doing activities that distract you or calm you down, such as meditation, mindfulness practices, or relaxation techniques. On the second row is the inaccurate assessment of control, and in doing can result in the person in over control mode. And as we already know, this can lead to frustration, anxiety, and depression. Keep in mind that even if the coping strategy used is an adaptive one, such as problem seeking, the inaccurate assessment will still lead that person to over control in the problem seeking strategy. And finally, the individual whose inaccurate assessment of personal control chooses in not doing results in passive coping and likely to adopt a maladaptive coping strategy that could involve denial, distancing, isolation, and helplessness. Complete this exercise and see if you can identify situations where your assessments of control was accurate or inaccurate and what you did when you were in doing mode and not doing mode. Given all that we have learned about coping, we may ask ourselves, what is the best coping mechanism? The most effective coping style is the one which reduces the stress and resolves the problem without enduring negative consequences. As we begin the second part of this module, I would like to ask you, as caregivers, community workers, or volunteers working with seniors, how do you see your clients coping with the current pandemic or any other issues? How do they seem to tolerate stressful events? And how well do you know their coping styles? What is your coping style when dealing with the stress of helping your loved one, your client, or your neighbor? In a study titled Coping Strategies Used by the Elderly Regarding Aging and Death, an Integrative Review, authors examined on how coping for the elderly is different from coping for people of other age groups, as stressors also change with age. While young adults experience more stress in areas related to work, their finances, home maintenance, their personal life, family, and friends, the elderly tend to experience stress related to the limitations of aging. Unlike youth, stressors for seniors are more likely to be changes, losses, and or decline in health, autonomy, financial loss, social status, social resources. Consider what the impact of these losses can be. For example, the loss of the ability to drive may impact one's social life, or the loss of mobility may impact the sense of autonomy or confidence. Given the losses and stressors that seniors experience, what then are the coping strategies that seniors adopt to maintain a positive outlook in life? The five strategies found in the study showed that negotiation is a strategy that allowed the seniors to find compromise between losses and what could be gained in exchange. For example, a senior losing her driver's license due to mobility issues could make the senior eligible for free adapted transport. Acceptance. Seniors showed that using past experiences to understand what the conditions of their situation was, were able to let go or surrender and adjust to the changes. Seeking social support. Reaching out to others for assistance or companionship to help deal with the changes. The value of social support and connection when experiencing life challenges remains true for all ages. Spiritual comfort, used as a self comforting strategy to find peace in the changes taking place. And finally, accommodation was used by seniors to adjust their goals and preferences by accepting and redefining a situation. And the example given in this study was that of an elderly patient who described accepting Parkinson's disease and seeking to learn from it. However, the study also found that there were those who could not accept the changes in their health conditions and who at this point stated that they could not find any meaning or purpose in their life and chose to remain isolated, distant, and avoided seeking help. So, unsurprisingly, adopting these maladaptive strategies were found to be linked to lower levels of subjective well being, while negotiation and accommodation were associated with higher levels of subjective well being in patients in declining health. In another study, we learned that for elderly with disability, positive coping and self management, as well as the use of external resources, were linked to successful adaptation. And social support has a significant effect on the coping process. Having an optimistic or pessimistic outlook when dealing with life's demands greatly influences our coping style and the degree of our resilience. Why is it important to learn about coping mechanisms and control when it comes to seniors? Because perceived control influences coping and, in turn, health outcomes. We've also come to understand that given the support and direction, seniors are more likely to adopt positive coping strategies, and that disabled seniors need the external resources to withstand their ability to adopt a positive coping style. And this is something policymakers must take into account when designing infrastructures in our cities. And finally, sharing and promoting these findings about seniors' coping strategies that deal with changes in their physical or mental well being will serve to do away with ageist views regarding seniors. The following two slides are quotes from an interview with three seniors in the community replying to the questions: how do you cope with stressful events? And how does it impact your life as you age? Wen went on to say, I learned very early at the orphanage that I have the power to take charge of my own life. And whenever someone else wanted to tell me I couldn't, I divorced them and left without a penny in my pocket. Or when times got tough, I remember taking to the bottle until a young man said something horrible to me, and I never drank an ounce of alcohol again. I regained my dignity and control of my life by helping others. I adopted the mantra from Mahatma Gandhi: the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I'm 83 now, and my health has declined significantly. So I make myself useful for advocating for seniors in my building who feel that they are being bullied. Another young senior explained how she coped during the pandemic and the silver lining of having to be temporarily restricted from outings. She says, COVID has changed some of the things I do. I miss outings and socialization, but it's also giving me the opportunity to continue to do the things I enjoy without interruptions. I always use my hobbies as a way to cope with stuff, and I accept the things I cannot change. This confinement has also pushed me to learn more about myself and to learn more from my 97-year-old mom. I don't stress about aging, it just happens, and I avoid mirrors. In an interview with the CBC, Dr. Roger McIntyre, professor of psychiatry and pharmacology at the University of Toronto, discusses memory and stress during this pandemic. One of the points he brought up was how the brain is always looking for predictability. And of course, this pandemic has caused much stress, mostly because of the unpredictability of the disease. He suggested keeping a routine that gives you a sense of control in how and when you will carry out your daily activities. Equally important is the need to maintain social connection, exercise, keeping a good sleep schedule, and of course, eating well. In that same interview, Dr. Natasha Raja, professor in the Department of Psychiatry at McGill University and the Douglas Research Center in Montreal, speaks of the importance of self care and engaging in activities that bring you joy and helping with memory. Activities such as art, music, gardening, or crafts. Here is a short but effective exercise to reflect and remind ourselves to engage in activities that bring us joy, especially during this pandemic. Keeping in touch with others on a regular basis, exercising, or engaging in self care activities are very important at this time. Add as many as you feel fit. The following slide can give you a few ideas. As in all our modules, we have included resources that may be useful to you. Thank you for your participation and hope that you can use the information and reflective exercises provided in this module to further develop your resilience. If you are interested in becoming a trainer, please contact Seniors Action Quebec at 438-386-1944 or write us at info@seniorsactionquebec.ca.